Sex. Asking a room full of addicts how they learned about sex would yield some very strange answers. Most of us struggle in some way with our sexuality. Discovering what is right and wrong for us in this area can be challenging. Each of us comes to terms with sex and our sexuality in a way. The steps provide us with the tools to come to terms with our past and to live free of the negative associations some of us have about sex. We start by accepting that there is a lot we don't understand. Being willing to see what has created our views on our own sexuality and the sexuality of others can help us to understand our beliefs. Many of us are a lot more comfortable with sex than with intimacy. We struggle with issues of self-loathing, contempt for others, and abuse. We may notice that we would rather have unsafe sex than risk a difficult conversation. Having honest, open dialogue with our sponsor brings us to a new level of trust. As we experience intimacy in that relationship, our ability to be intimate with our partners and with others increases as well. Some of our most deeply held shame derives from the things we did sexually. Our past behaviors may reflect how desperate we were to get and use more, or they may have been the best we could do to find love and connection. Sexual abuse may also be part of our stories. This can be incredibly difficult to talk about. We may believe we are the only ones. On the contrary, it is remarkably common among addicts. Finding the words and a safe place to say them can be the difference between being able to live with ourselves and spending our lives on the run from our past. We examine our history in the 4 steps and begin sorting out who we are from what happened to us and what we did. Healing takes time, but it does happen. We must be patient with ourselves. Gradually, we come to experience freedom from some of our deepest wounds. As we begin to clear up some of the confusion and contradiction in our lives, we can move forward with less of the baggage we brought in with us. We struggle with relationships. Experienced members suggest that we give ourselves a break for the first year, stay out of relationships, and put our recovery first. But few of us heed this wise advice. We come into recovery lonely, horny, and insecure. We are emotionally raw, and our judgment is still pretty impaired. We run headlong into relationships only to discover how challenging they are. 2 sick people rarely make a well couple. We mistake novelty for love and find ourselves deep in commitment almost before we know each other, or fear commitment so much that we don't give our partner a chance. We open the door for relapse when we get caught in loops of obsession and compulsion. We try, and sometimes we make mistakes. Each mistake carries a gift and a hazard. We can learn from our mistakes and use them, or let our guilt and remorse drive us into a corner or out of the program. The more practice we get at using the steps and other tools of recovery, the more we are able to use our mistakes to propel us forward. We define ourselves partly through our sexuality. For some, that definition is a major portion of our identity. Sometimes we come to wield it like a weapon to justify our feeling different. We can be much more aware of the people who are not open to us than those who are. In the rooms of NA, we are welcomed regardless of our sexuality. We find people who love us and with whom we feel comfortable, no matter what our sexuality or our beliefs about sexuality. Although some of us arrived in the fellowship secure in our sexual identity, others of us struggled with confusion and distortions about our gender or orientation. We may have engaged in behaviors that conflicted with our beliefs in order to continue using or to gain acceptance from others. Or we chased sex the same way we chased drugs, feeling just as powerless and out of control. Some of us followed those drives into relationship after relationship without ever really feeling fulfilled. Many of us confused sexual connections with intimacy and became so divorced from our feelings and desire for emotional connection that we would settle for physical interaction. This can follow us well into our recovery and may point to an ongoing struggle with opening up to emotional intimacy. For those of us who use sex as a way to move through the world, it may take quite some time to figure out the difference between being sexual and being intimate. Working through these issues takes time, trust in our sponsors and close friends, willingness to challenge our assumptions, faith in the process, and ultimately self acceptance. The next chapter will address our relationships in more detail. What we will say here is that part of learning how to live in our bodies is learning how to acknowledge the reality of our sexuality. We want to learn to express our sexuality in healthy and fulfilling ways, something that was unimaginable in our active addiction. Sex is different when we're clean. When we are neither numbed out nor artificially stimulated, we can be present to our own experience and to our partner in a very different way. Sometimes this can be frightening. Sometimes it can be addictively exciting. Finding pleasure in our sexuality without thinking of it as a means of exchange or power can be a great freedom. For some of us, this takes longer than it does for others. We can enjoy ourselves and each other fully in the moment and learn what it really is to connect. We can be intimate. We can open up and be real. We don't have to use each other as a drug. When we treat each other as human beings, we find our own dignity.